Hi, friends. Welcome to the Tiny Titans podcast, where we tell NICU stories. I am Katie. I'm the host of this podcast. This is my brainchild, my baby. I've been trying to do this for like 6 years, probably at least. My oldest is 7. Um, and I have, ever since we've been in the NICU, I wanted to tell her story. I wanted to give my experience, our experiences, things that we've learned. There was tons of things that I wanted to ask people while I was in the NICU that I thought it wasn't appropriate to ask, or I thought people would think it was weird. Here is where we're going to do all of that. All of the weird stories, all of the intense stories, crazy, stressful, traumatic stories, beautiful, miraculous stories here. The goal is to have a lot of resource in one place. So if you're in the NICU at 3 in the morning and you're trying to figure out who else has done this before, what did they decide? What did their nurse say? How long ago was that? Is that applicable to me? You have all of those resources in this on this podcast right here. Um, Stories from preemie babies, which is my expertise. I have preemie babies. All 3 of my babies were preemies, and I have 2 babies that live in heaven. I'll tell their stories as well. So since this is the first episode, we'll do a little bit about me so you know exactly what to expect going forward. Hi, I'm Katie. I have 3 girls, all of which were born premature. My first was born at 32 weeks. My second was born at 22 weeks. And my third was born at 31 weeks. So a lot of NICU stay for our family. In fact, in total, they were in the NICU for 343 days. So Cassie plus Carter, Cassie plus Carter plus Colby in the NICU was 343 days that me or my husband was in the NICU with them. So we have a lot of stories. I personally can just fill this podcast with stories of this happened with this girl and this story happened with this. The most basic thing that I would like to get up first is the birth stories. Just what happened before you were pregnant, how did the pregnancy go, um, why were you ending up in the NICU, like how did the actual birth go, and then the NICU story, what happened in the NICU, what was the diagnosis of your child, how long were you there, um, any details, all details. And I'm also open to questions for those things. So if I tell a story on this podcast and you have questions about it, ask me. We'll find out, or ask whoever is on the podcast that day. We'll find out the answers for you, especially if you're in the NICU right now and it's something you're like, hey, that is super similar to what my family is going through, and I would like to discuss that. Fine, I will figure out how to make that happen too. Um, so so many ideas for this podcast. There's so many things that could happen. But just to start, we're going to start with a collection of NICU stories and kind of go from there. Um, the reason why is because I was that person. I was that mom in the NICU that had just given birth to a teeny tiny baby. I mean, for example, my second NICU daughter is Carter. She was born at 22 weeks, 2 days. Um, and I, in fact, went into labor with her about 22 weeks, and it took about a day and a half for everything for her to come out because we were trying to keep her in. So, but her entire story will be on here. We were in the NICU for 9.5 months with Carter. So I have every day is a story. Every day something happened. Every day I had an interaction with another NICU mom, another nurse, someone, you know what I mean? All of those things come to me all the time, and I just want to share those stories because I know other people have those stories. The other thing is I'm already a part of certain networks for medical moms, groups on Facebook and groups on Instagram and things like that. Um, And they all say the same thing. We're all just looking for other people who have done this. What did you do? Did your G2 baby get granulation? Did they not? What did you do? That's what we want to know. And that's going to be like, I want it to be like a real time kind of library of resources so that we can just like keep this dialogue going. You can find out about the story and ask about the story at the same time. Let's just keep everything open and moving so that everyone can get what information they need. I think that is the most important part that I would like to get through. And it being 2024, I really thought that there would be more tiny baby NICU stories than there are. Even today, I was looking up just NICU podcasts, NICU blogs. A lot of them are from the same people. A lot of them are ones that I've seen before, like from the last 5 years. So, where are the stories? Where is all the new stuff? And I know that this is a very sometimes traumatic thing. People hold these stories very close to the heart because it is your heart. Your heart is in the incubator. Your heart is in the NICU, the PICU, going, graduating. That is your baby, and that is your full emotions just open and raw, and that's just what it is. And that's really hard to talk about. That's really hard to talk about, especially when you're in the NICU. So my youngest is going to be a year soon, and I think it's going to help me. I think talking about all of these things with other people is going to help me. So maybe that's part of the reason why I want to do it. When I was in the NICU, what I really wanted was another family, and the nurses could hook me up with a couple of different families who had done this. But again, they were going through it sometimes right then, or they had just gone through it and are going through something else. Going as soon as you graduate the NICU, if you have any sort of medical diagnosis, or you come home, Carter came home with oxygen and a G tube, so we were still pretty much no touchy, because it's basically like you bring the NICU home with you. It's not like you're home with a baby, so it's very different. um but I really wanted to talk to those families. I wanted the inside scoop. You just did it. I want to know, what are we going to be facing? What are we going through? What's the next step? What should I be preparing for? Really is probably in my case, because that's all I want to prep. I want to prep for everything. I would like to know a month in advance. If you could please tell me. That's not what happens in the NICU. You walk into the NICU to see your baby and they say, well, these things happened over the last 5 hours. And you go, now what do we do? Because that's completely different than when I left. You know what I mean? It's very, very different. And I just wanted to be able to plan. And if you have a place where all these resources are together, I feel like you can just like pick out the information that you would choose to need and take it with you if you would like to do that. So when I was in the NICU, because I didn't have all of these stories just at the ready, I had not already made all of these friends. I googled whatever would come to mind. Some of these are a little telling. I have them written down so I don't forget them, but some of the things that I googled were holidays in the NICU, which sucks to do holidays in the NICU, and we're coming up to holiday season. And if you're going through it, I was there twice, so I got you. Um, NICU arts and crafts, like all those cute little footprint things. I love those. Those are great. Bible verses about grief and worry and anxiety. And just so we're learning about me and where I am, I'm a Bible believing Christian, and that's where I go. I go to the Bible when I need help. So when I was in the NICU, another place that I went, because I was Googling all of these things, you can Google Bible verses about, I'm feeling this. I'm feeling very angry today. Where should I go? So that was another thing that I did. And a lot of my personal stories will have God in them, or this is what God did, or I saw God in this way, or this was a miracle, or my friend sent me this worship song and it really helped me that day. That's where I'm at. That's the kind of person that I am. So those were those stories that we'll have. And I actually have a whole list in I kept books for each of my kids. So I have like a notebook. Actually, I think one of Carter's is right here. I just plain old notebooks, and I keep all of their notes for their records for when we're doing rounds for anything. If I have questions, or I have I have it written down. So if you want to know what I was thinking or what we were doing or what her stats were, I probably have it. A lot of times the nurses at rounds would look at me and be like, "Is that right?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's what I have." So in Carter's notebook, I actually have like this is where we saw God at. Like this happened, this person came in, and there's no way that they could have known. That had to have been God. Or like this money just came in and it just so happened to be the same amount as a bill that we just got. Those types of things happen to us. And it's crazy. It's crazy. It's amazing, but it takes your human brain a lot of capacity to understand how God is working in the tiny things. Other Google searches that I looked for were these are kind of scarier ones. What are the chances of preemie moms having other preemie births? In my opinion, and other people that I have talked to, it is kind of a toss up. It's about 50-50. What happened to me is I had all 3 preemies and 2 losses. But that's not what has happened to others. I know some who have had preemies for their first and full term for their seconds and thirds. Everyone's different. I also Googled other statistics about weight and height and gestation and risks of different disorders and all of it. I looked everything up. And so the biggest problem then was when I was looking up all of those statistics, I didn't have any place to talk to anyone about it. So I'd be like, did you hear that this percent of NICU moms are not even able to breastfeed because of stress? That blew my mind. I was like, no one else cares about this. That's what we're going to talk about here. Do you care about that? If you care about that, it's going to be here. So it's not just for NICU parents. I also want that, like, NICU parents are going to be on here, but also NICU nurses. I've got a couple of NICU nurses lined up to come share their experiences, why they became NICU nurses, all of that. I love that. So I really want to make that resource here, so you can find it. So when you're Googling, if you're Googling, or if you know someone in the NICU who is trying to figure something out and can't find it, they can find our podcast and find these stories and find these statistics and different parents and moms who went through those things, and maybe get a hold of someone who would help on a more personal level. That is the main goal, just to have more NICU parents involved with NICU parents to advocate for each other, to say that, yeah, this is hard, and yeah, they need some time to think about that decision, or there's so many options that could happen. I just want that. I want to start that here. I don't see that very many places, and I know that something that is yearned for in the NICU community. So let's do the hard stuff here. We'll do it all together. Okay, so rewind about your host, because I completely forgot. My name is Katie. I am married to my husband, Doug. We've been married for almost 11 years. We have 3 daughters. I had a miscarriage in 2016. I had my daughter Cassidy in 2017. My daughter Ava, we lost at 19 weeks in 2019. Then we had Carter in 2022, and Colby in 2023. And they're making groundbreaking advances in technology in the NICU every single day. And for people like Carter, for our family, for anyone who's born 24 weeks and before, because 22 weekers and 23 weekers are becoming frequent, are becoming a normal thing. That's not a super scary thing. We've done this a couple of times. They're being able to save babies younger and younger because of the technological advances that they're making, but they have to practice. They have to practice those things. When Carter was in the NICU, we trialed a lot of different new things for other parents, so that, like, different ways to hold your baby so that you felt secure, so the baby was secure. In our case, Carter was intubated, so we had a lot of tubes that was going all over the place that needed to stay very secure, so we couldn't be wiggling around. Um, all of those types of ideas and things is another reason I would like to make a place for this podcast. So my personal experience with my Tiny Titans is 3 Tiny Titans, 3 NICU stays, um, 343 days total stayed in the NICU. And that was that spanned over 6 years in 3 different NICU facilities, because um, Carter had a surgery and we went to a different NICU facility up in Chicago. So lots of different places that we've been and had babies taken care of in different NICUs. Um, so again, I have lots of details about all of those things. If you're into that, this is your podcast. To start with a story, I'm going to leave you with kind of a harder story. And I know that this nurse is going to see this story, so that makes it a little scarier to put out. But um so when I had Colby, um I got to see her the quickest. After, I wasn't able to see Carter and Cassie until like 24 and 48 hours after um having given birth to them. Doug went and saw them and took care of them while I was being taken care of. But with Colby, I was a little more with it. I wasn't quite needing as much care as I was with the first two. And so I went down, I think that day, that evening. Um, this is hard. This is already hard. Okay. So I went down that evening to see Colby, and I knew my nurse from Carter. Had been there with her. She was talking to me about Colby and about how she was so different and how she was so strong and how she was doing all these great things. And I liked hearing that, but I was in a very not good mental state. And so I really felt guilty for my body giving up again. Because I felt like my body can make babies, but my body can't hold on to babies, which that's not creating healthy humans. So there's something wrong with me, is what I thought at that time. I know logically that's not correct, but so I went down to see my nurse, and she was trying to see if I wanted to hold Colby, and I did not want to hold Colby, because I just thought that, like, I just needed time or space, or like I couldn't wrap my head around, like, another preemie baby, another NICU stay, how long this time, like all those thoughts were just like all over. So I and she just kind of sat with me, and I was kind of quiet for a while, and she just kind of told me about what they had been doing with Colby and how big she was, um and all these things, and how they already knew she wasn't going to stay in the NICU for very long. She was doing so well. And again, I was not there. I was completely thinking the opposite. Anything that my nurse told me, I would be like, yeah, until this happens or until this happens. Um, so I didn't want to hold her because I felt like I would just like give off all of this terrible energy. Like I wasn't in a good space. I didn't think to like meet my daughter, like I knew that from previous experience that she was taken care of, that she was under control. I completely give all of my authority to my NICU nurses. I knew that she had her, and so I wasn't like worried about her. I just I had all of these emotions that I didn't know what to do with them. Um, whew, and those emotions, they come back at you when you're telling these stories. So, um, so my nurse sat down with me next to Colby, and she said, why don't you want to hold her? And I sort of started telling her these thoughts that I was having, and she was like, I think that's really important to talk about. And I was sort of caught off guard. I was like, what? I thought she was going to say, oh, but you just had this beautiful baby. Like, she's just wonderful. Don't you want to just like love on her? And she just like got it instantly. Like, it was really, really great. Um, and she kind of explained like why it was okay for me to feel these things and why it was okay for me to just like cry if I needed to cry, and all of that stuff. And that was just what I needed at that time. Like that's probably one of the things that NICU nurses don't get enough recognition for, is they take care of the babies, but they take care of the moms too. They take care of the dads. They go into these care conferences with these people that they don't know. They take care of your baby every day, but and then they just back you up. No questions asked. It's so great. And I just really appreciate NICU nurses. I do. Like that's one of the things I'm really big into that. But this NICU nurse that I'm talking about, who was there and took care of Colby, her first shift. Thank you. Um, so that wraps up our first our first official podcast episode of the Tiny Titans podcast. Hopefully, not all will end in tears. I do not guarantee that. And I will not give any trigger warnings. If you are a NICU person, you know that what you're getting into. Um, so thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you go listen to all the rest of the stories. Did you know that World Prematurity Day is November 17th? I did. I have 3 preemie babies. I do. And this is the littlest one. This is Colby Gale. And because of my 3 preemies and my NICU stays with each baby, and all of the experience and stories that I have started a podcast called the Tiny Titans Podcast. So if you are interested in NICU or anything NICU related, NICU babies, yeah, you should come listen to that podcast. Tiny Titan Podcast. It's on Spotify, on YouTube, and hopefully some other places too. And you can find my TikTok. It's Kaity Brutlag, Tiny Podcast, Tiny Titan Podcast host. And this little lady story will be on there soon.